Alejandro Mendoza sped down the highway toward his luxury home outside Madrid, eager to surprise his 8-year-old twin daughters, Emma and Sofia, after 3 weeks of business trips across Asia. The torrential rain made driving treacherous, but nothing could dampen his excitement at the thought of hugging his little girls again. He turned onto the private driveway, and what he saw froze him in place. The twins were sitting under the old oak tree in the front yard, completely soaked through. They clung to each other desperately, crying silently in the midst of the storm. There was no sign of his wife, Valentina, and no lights on in the house. He leaped out of the car without turning off the engine and ran toward them, slipping on the wet grass. The girls threw themselves into his arms, trembling from cold and fear, sobbing as they told him that Mommy had left 3 days earlier, locking them out of the house and ordering them to wait for her right there. As he held his freezing daughters, Alejandro realized the nightmare was only beginning. On Emma's phone was a video Valentina had recorded before disappearing, a message that would shatter everything he thought he knew about his family. The September storm raged over the elegant suburbs of Madrid as Alejandro Mendoza headed home from the airport. He had spent 3 weeks in Japan closing a $200 million acquisition that would solidify his tech empire. But now, all he wanted was to see Emma and Sofia again. His 8-year-old twins were his reason for living, the only pure thing in a world of balance sheets and corporate strategy. The automatic gate opened for his Mercedes, but something about the familiar scene immediately unsettled him. The house looked dead. No lights in the windows, no sign of life. It was impossible. Valentina knew he was coming home, though he had moved his flight up 2 days to surprise the girls. Then he saw them. 2 small figures huddled under the massive oak in the front yard, completely exposed to the elements. His heart stopped when he recognized their pink clothes, now drenched and caked with mud. Emma and Sofia clung to each other like abandoned puppies, their little bodies shaking with sobs and cold, their blonde hair plastered to their tear-streaked faces by the pouring rain. Alejandro left the car running and sprinted toward them, his $3,000 suit jacket instantly soaked. The girls looked up with devastated, tear-stained faces and flung themselves at him with the desperation of children who had given up hope of being saved. Their bodies were ice-cold, their clothes completely saturated, their lips purple from the chill. The story that spilled out between sobs was a living nightmare. Valentina had vanished 3 days earlier after dragging the girls outside and locking the house. She had left them there with orders not to move. To wait under the tree as punishment for being bad. But Emma and Sofia couldn't even remember what they had done wrong. Carmen, their trusted housekeeper, had been fired a week earlier on a fabricated excuse. The girls had spent 3 nights sleeping outside, drinking rainwater and eating berries from the tree when hunger became unbearable. The nearest neighbors were too far away to hear their cries, hidden behind the tall hedge surrounding the property. Alejandro circled the house and found every door locked. A kitchen window had been broken from the inside, evidence someone had forced their way out. He climbed through, cutting his hand on the remaining glass, and stepped into chaos. Furniture overturned, drawers emptied, clothes scattered everywhere, like the aftermath of an earthquake. The master bedroom had been stripped bare. All of Valentina's clothes, jewelry, and expensive suitcases were gone. The girl's room, however, remained untouched, as if she had deliberately ignored any trace of her daughters in her planned escape. After getting the twins into dry clothes and a warm bath, Alejandro had to face the truth that terrified him most. On Emma's pink phone was a video recorded 3 days earlier, titled "The Truth You Deserve to Know." Valentina's face filled the screen, but it was a woman Alejandro had never seen before. The eyes that once captivated him now burned with pure hatred. Her aristocratic features were twisted into a cold, cruel smile. She wore the Chanel suit he had bought her for their last anniversary, perfectly groomed as if heading to a social event rather than abandoning her own children. In minutes, her words destroyed 10 years of marriage and 8 years of shared parenthood. Valentina confessed she had never wanted children, had hated every moment with the twins, and had even prayed for a miscarriage during the pregnancy. Only the luxurious lifestyle Alejandro provided had kept her there. But the final blow was her admission of systematic betrayal. Ricardo Herrera, his business partner and best friend of 20 years, had been her lover for the past 3. Every business trip had been an opportunity for Valentina to mock him behind his back with the man he trusted most. The video showed her loading suitcases while the twins cried in the background, utterly indifferent to their despair. She had drained $5 million from their joint account and was already on a yacht in international waters by the time Alejandro found the girls. The last image was the cruelest smile he had ever seen, as Valentina sarcastically wished the new single dad good luck with his little princesses. When the video ended, Emma looked up at her father with wisdom far beyond her 8 years. Her question broke his heart. She wanted to know if Mommy had ever really loved them. In that moment, holding his 2 innocent, still trembling girls, Alejandro understood that money, trust, and pride meant nothing. All that mattered were the 2 children in his arms and the silent vow he made never to leave them alone again. The weeks that followed were the hardest of Alejandro's life. He not only had to help the twins heal from devastating emotional trauma but also uncover the full extent of the betrayal. The missing $5 million was just the beginning. Valentina had orchestrated a series of systematic thefts with professional precision. The girls' trust fund had been completely emptied. Family heirloom jewelry had been sold to private collectors. Even confidential business documents were gone, likely copied and sold to competitors before she fled. But the deepest wounds were psychological. Emma became fiercely overprotective of her sister and panicked whenever Alejandro left the house, even for groceries. Her separation anxiety was so severe she followed him to the bathroom, unable to be alone for minutes. Sofia stopped speaking entirely, communicating only in whispers to her twin. She could no longer eat solid food, accepting only warm milk and crumbled cookies. Her once bright, curious eyes had turned dull and wary, like those of a wounded animal. Child psychologist Dr. Marina Ruiz was brutally honest at their first session. The girls had suffered severe abandonment trauma that would require years of intensive therapy. Above all, Alejandro needed to be fully and constantly present. No more business trips, no more delegating to staff, no priorities but his daughters. Alejandro didn't hesitate. He delegated day-to-day operations of his company to his most trusted VP, turned the home office into his primary workspace, and completely reshaped his life for the first time in a decade. His absolute priority was no longer business, it was Emma and Sofia's healing. The early weeks were an emotional ordeal. The girls woke screaming in the night, terrified their father had vanished too. Alejandro began sleeping on a mattress on their bedroom floor, one hand always reaching toward their beds to reassure them with his touch. Emma developed obsessive checking rituals, verifying doors were locked dozens of times, confirming Daddy was still there, ensuring no one could enter or leave without warning. Sofia stopped playing altogether, spending days curled in a corner of the living room, watching everything with frightened eyes but never making a sound. Alejandro tracked every small step forward and every setback, learning to recognize the signs of a panic attack before it escalated. He hired a new caregiver, Pilar, a warm, experienced 50-year-old woman specializing in childhood trauma, but most importantly, he became the hands-on father he had never been before. He personally made breakfast, braided their hair, and read bedtime stories with different voices for each character. He learned that Emma calmed down only with heart-shaped pancakes and that Sofia would eat only food he prepared himself. The turning point came a month after the abandonment. Alejandro was making dinner when he heard a small, trembling voice behind him. It was Sofia, breaking weeks of silence to ask if she could learn to cook like him. She wanted to make something special for Emma when she was sad, to make her smile too. In that moment, Alejandro realized his girls weren't just surviving the trauma, they were transforming their pain into love for each other. The affection Valentina had never been capable of giving, they were finding within themselves and in their bond with him. But the biggest challenge was still ahead. One night, as he watched the twins play timidly in the living room for the first time in weeks, Alejandro received a call that chilled him to the bone. His lawyer, Martinez, had received legal papers from Monaco that changed everything. Valentina wasn't satisfied with abandoning her daughters and stealing millions. Now she wanted legal custody, not to take them, but to block Alejandro from making any major decisions about their lives without her written consent. It was the final act of cruelty from a woman who had turned vengeance into a sadistic art form. And Alejandro knew the real battle was just beginning. Lawyer Martinez showed Alejandro the documents Valentina had filed for Monaco. The strategy was diabolically clever. Instead of admitting abandonment, she claimed a temporary leave due to postpartum stress, accused Alejandro of international child abduction, and even submitted falsified DNA evidence to question his paternity. Ricardo Herrera wasn't just the lover, he was the mastermind. As business partner, he had given Valentina access to accounts, confidential information, and the blueprint for stealing millions through transfers that appeared authorized by Alejandro himself. Back home, Emma waited with the precocious insight of a child who had suffered too soon, asking if the bad lady would come back to take them away. Alejandro promised no one would ever take them. That night he hired private investigator Marco Santini, an expert in international fraud. If they wanted to play dirty with lies and blackmail, he would fight with the truth. Meanwhile, he continued his transformation from absent executive to present father. He learned Emma's complicated braids, special recipes to coax Sophia to eat, and the warning signs of anxiety attacks. The girls slowly blossomed under his care. Sophia began whispering a few words again. Emma grew protective of her father too. One night Alejandro overheard them talking. They had to take care of sad daddy, tell him every day they loved him, and be good so he wouldn't worry. Official DNA tests confirmed what Alejandro already knew, he was unquestionably their father. But investigator Santini's call revealed a truth about Valentina far more shocking than anything he had imagined. The woman Alejandro married didn't exist. Valentina Ruiz was a fabricated identity. Her real name was Vanessa Kowalski, a serial con artist specializing in marriage scams. She had passports from 6 countries and a history of wealthy husbands systematically robbed and abandoned. In Germany, she married a 60-year-old industrialist and vanished with $2 million. He later took his own life. In France, she seduced a widowed banker with 2 children, sold the late wife's jewelry, then fled. He also committed suicide. The most horrifying discovery concerned the twins' pregnancy. Vanessa had scheduled a selective abortion to terminate one fetus, stopping only when she realized twins would tie her more securely to Alejandro's fortune, a purely financial decision. Evidence showed years of systematic infidelity, dozens of lovers, blackmail of executives caught in compromising situations, and the house turned into a hub for affairs whenever Alejandro traveled. Emma had witnessed some scenes, explaining her recurring nightmares in recent months. Vanessa's personal journal documented 8 years of flawless acting, describing with contempt how she faked maternal love and endured the girls' affection just to maintain her cover. The final plan had been to leave them outside in the storm, hoping they would become gravely ill so she could later accuse Alejandro of neglect. Herrera, having discovered Vanessa's true nature, was ready to testify against her to save himself. That night, Alejandro looked at Emma and Sophia with new eyes. They weren't just abandoned children, they were survivors who had endured 8 years with a sociopath while miraculously keeping their capacity to love intact. 18 months after that rainy night, the house pulsed with new life. Laughter filled every room, the girls' drawings covered the walls, and the yard now held a swing set and treehouse Alejandro had built himself. The legal battle ended in total victory. Vanessa Kowalski was arrested in Monaco for multiple counts of fraud, bigamy, and child abandonment. Herrera's cooperation helped recover nearly all the stolen money. The court permanently revoked Vanessa's rights, naming Alejandro sole legal parent. The twins, now 10, were transformed. Emma channeled her protectiveness into a passion for art, her colorful paintings decorated Alejandro's office. Sophia blossomed into a little chef, preparing Sunday lunches for the expanded family that had formed. Pilar had become the true maternal figure the girls never had. Her 15-year-old son, Mario, was the perfect big brother, protective and playful. The house now sheltered a real family bound by chosen love, not blood. Alejandro kept his promise to be fully present, restructuring work to operate mostly from home. He attended every school event and knew all the girls' friends. He had learned that true wealth meant being surrounded by people who love you for who you are. During the dinner marking the anniversary of when they became a real family, Emma said the bad lady had done them a favor by leaving. Now they had Daddy all to themselves, Pilar who truly loved them, and they understood that the most beautiful families are the ones chosen by the heart. Dr. Ruiz confirmed the girls had not only healed but grown stronger, more empathetic, and more capable of love than many who had never suffered. Rain no longer frightened anyone in that house. They had learned that the most beautiful rainbows follow the fiercest storms. 5 years after the night that changed everything, Alejandro stood in the yard watching a scene that filled his heart with joy so intense it felt unreal. Emma, now 15 with long blonde hair dancing in the breeze, was teaching 13-year-old Sophia, her blue eyes identical to his, how to plant tulip bulbs under the tree that once witnessed their despair. The sisters worked together with the perfect harmony that comes only from souls who have shared pain and turned it into strength. Emma patiently explained the right depth for each bulb while Sophia prepared the soil with small but steady hands, both laughing at a private joke. Pilar, now 55 but with the radiant smile of someone who had found her place in the world, was preparing a special afternoon snack on the terrace overlooking the garden. She had taken to documenting every happy moment with photos and videos, as if to capture joy before it could slip away again. Mario, now 20 and studying medicine at university, was home for the weekend helping Alejandro install a new swing beside the treehouse they had built together years earlier. He had grown into not just the perfect big brother but the confidant and friend the girls needed as they navigated early adolescence. The Mendoza family's transformation had become legendary in their community and beyond. Alejandro wrote a book about their journey, When Love Wins, the story of a family rebuilt, donating all proceeds to organizations helping abandoned and traumatized children. It became an international bestseller, inspiring thousands of single parents never to give up. Emma had inherited her father's blue eyes, business instinct, and unstoppable determination. At 15 she had founded a small nonprofit raising funds for struggling families by organizing art events featuring her increasingly sought-after paintings. Sophia discovered her culinary talent hid a deeper gift for nurturing wounded souls. She cooked not just for the family but prepared hot meals for the homeless in their area every Saturday, drawing neighbors into a network of solidarity that strengthened the entire community. The house, once a stage for deception and betrayal, had become an open refuge where friends, neighbors, and even strangers in need knew they would find an open door and a welcoming heart. Alejandro established a foundation using part of the estate to shelter families in crisis, offering psychological and financial support to single parents rebuilding their lives. During that Sunday's sacred family dinner, no work or social obligation ever interrupted it. A phone call brought everyone back to reality. Lawyer Martinez had news about Vanessa Kowalski, now 40 and still imprisoned in Monaco. The woman who nearly destroyed their family had reached out through her attorneys, claiming she had changed, found redemption in prison therapy, and wanted to apologize to the daughters she abandoned. She requested a meeting, a chance to explain and perhaps rebuild a relationship. Alejandro looked at Emma and Sophia, now old enough to decide such matters for themselves. The girls exchanged one of their perfected glances of understanding. Then Emma spoke for both with maturity that left everyone speechless. She said they already had a mother, Pilar, who had raised them with real love every day for 5 years. They had a complete, happy family built on genuine care and mutual sacrifice. The woman who gave birth to them belonged to the past, a painful but closed chapter. Sophia added that they felt no anger or desire for revenge, but no need to actively forgive someone who was no longer part of their lives. They had learned that sometimes the healthiest justice is simply moving forward, building something beautiful where there was once only pain. Alejandro smiled at his daughters, realizing they had grown into women of wisdom and strength beyond his wildest hopes. He called the lawyer and politely declined the request, explaining the Mendoza family had turned the page for good. That night, as he made his rounds turning off lights and checking that everyone slept peacefully, Alejandro paused at the family photo dominating the entryway. It showed him with Emma, Sofia, Pilar, and Mario on their latest vacation in Andalusia, all smiling under the golden glow of a perfect sunset. It was impossible to look at that photo and imagine three of them weren't related by blood. The love shining from their faces, the natural way they leaned on one another, the genuine joy they radiated, it was living proof that the most authentic families are chosen day after day. Before heading to bed, Alejandro did what he had done every night for 5 years. He quietly opened the girls' bedroom door to make sure they slept peacefully. Emma and Sofia, still sharing a room by choice despite plenty of space, slept soundly, their faces relaxed and smiling even in dreams. No longer the terrified little girls trembling in the rain, but two strong, confident young women who knew they were loved unconditionally. Their peaceful sleep was the greatest reward Alejandro could imagine for all the sacrifices and sleepless nights. As he walked to his room, Alejandro reflected on the strange and wonderful ways of fate. Vanessa Kowalski thought she had destroyed his life by abandoning his daughters in a storm, but in reality she had given him the chance to become the man and father he never knew he could be. The gentle rain that had begun to fall brought no fear to that house, only peace. They had learned that true love never abandons, that the most beautiful families are born from choices of the heart more than accidents of blood, and that sometimes the worst tragedies become the brightest miracles when we choose hope over despair. The Mendoza home slept in the quiet of the night, protected not by alarms or gates, but by the unbreakable love that had transformed 4 wounded souls into an indestructible family. Sometimes the wrong people leave us to make room for the right ones. Sometimes the most beautiful family is the one we choose to build with love. And sometimes it just takes one father who decides to always be there to turn a tragedy into a miracle.